I'd like to thank everyone for coming. My name is Anne Marie Dennis. I am president of the Northgate Tenants Association. I wanted to start off by explaining very briefly that we're here to lend a hand to the tenants to help them find a way to save Northgate. Hopefully in the spirit of Vermonters helping each other. I know I came from a small town in Vermont, and when somebody was in need of help, no one asked. The people who were in need of help didn't have to ask their neighbors. They just volunteered to help. And that's what we're kind of hoping will happen today. And that's also the reason why Northgate Nonprofit was formed. All the people in the area knew that Northgate was going to need help in keeping it affordable. So they all joined together and formed a task force. And the task force became Northgate Nonprofit. So I would just like to say that we're not out here looking for a handout. We're just out here looking for a helping hand. And now I'll introduce Senator Leahy.
Thank you very much. First, I want to applaud all that you have done here. But before I do that, I want to applaud the mayor of the city of Burlington, Bernie Sanders. Mayor Sanders has worked tirelessly, not only in this project, but on so many others in Burlington, where we have been able to get federal funds to go along with whatever other funds might be there, private, state, or local. I have enjoyed over the years the working relationship with the mayor. I have a great deal of admiration for his concern for Burlington and his dedication to Burlington. And I think if anything, he deserves a great hand of applause for what he has done here. What I'm looking forward to is seeing the private fundraising drive that will go along here to match to raise, as I understand it, $20,000 to match the $60,000 I was able to get for this project in the fiscal year '89 HUD appropriations bill. And I'm delighted to see that will be underway. It's a kind of a public-private development group we see here is extraordinary. And I think that I think it's going to be successful. But the measure of its success is going to be not just here at Northgate, but you're going to find groups like this all over the country studying what you've done here, because it's necessary. In so many parts of the nation, we have a shortage of housing, especially for people of low or modest income, that has the greatest of any time in my lifetime. Every part of the nation. You make it work here, then we're going to see it work elsewhere. This is actually the kind of partnership that the outgoing administration has praised in its rhetoric, but of course is seldom supported with adequate funding, as we've seen the amounts of federal dollars going down, down, down. Now, if Congress will pass, and if the new president will sign the legislation that Senators Cranston and D'Amato will be introducing early next year, then broad-based partnerships like this are going to be on the cutting edge of housing preservation and production for years and years to come. In the 60s and the 70s, there were a lot of houses built under federal programs that did not plan for what happens in the future. If we have cooperative federal, state, and local efforts, we can save them. If we don't, we won't. That's one of the reasons why I praise Mayor Sanders so much in this and trying to bring together federal, state, and local cooperative and private efforts to do this. So you put together a masterful financing package for this, but you're going to need additional HUD funds to write down the cost of the renovation. And I've looked at the way the elections have come out. I will still be in the majority party. I will still be on the appropriation subcommittee that involves here, and I will go to bat with HUD and will continue to go to bat with HUD until the whole subject is resolved here. And we will have those federal funds, but I would urge the community to work with us in raising the money. The past 8 years haven't been good for affordable housing. Federal funding has been reduced by more than 65%. But we can show here that we can work together. So I would really urge the private community to work with the local government, work with those of us who are trying to get federal funds to make this a success. It can be a success. If it is, it will help not only the people here, but that success will help people throughout the country, because I predict it will be the model to be used in other parts of the country. So I thank you very much for your work.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Leahy. Now we have John Carlo and Kathy Sweeten from the Northern Vermont Home Builders Association.
Sure. Anne Marie, Senator, I'd like to, on behalf of the Home Builders Association of Northern Vermont, thank you with a check for $5,000 to help with kick off the fundraising drive. Hi. Well,
that's an example of what has to be done. I'm just looking with, it's going to be fun. We walk down to the bank and slip this thing through. The deposit slip will just be about this big. So
we'll try to get you a smaller version of it.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Marie.
Very much. That's great.
Next we have Mike McNamara, who is the president of the Northgate nonprofit.
I'll just say a few words and then introduce some of the other actors who are bringing resources to the table to make this development happen. First of all, I'd like to praise the efforts of the Northgate nonprofit, which is virtually every nonprofit in the city of Burlington, which is a substantial number, which have come together to organize this effort and to assist in bringing the resources to the table. I'd have to especially praise Senator Leahy and his office. They've already gone to bat for us in Washington, and HUD at Washington has advised us that we will be receiving 163 Section 8 loan management project-based subsidies to help this project work. So that's a vital piece that will be coming down the pike, and we thank Senator Leahy's office for helping us with that. This has been a true community effort. There's been participation from at every level of the community, the city, the state, and I feel that it's going to be a model for these types of developments in the future. Without going on, first I'm going to introduce the whole cast of characters, and then they'll each have an opportunity to say a few words. First of all, to my right, to Anne Marie's immediate right, is Bernard Sanders, Mayor of the City of Burlington. To his right, Al Moulton, Secretary of Development for the Agency of Development and Community Affairs. To his right, Alan Hunt, the Executive Director of Vermont Housing Finance Agency. Next to him, Gus Seelig, the Director of the Vermont Housing and Conservation Trust Fund. And to the far right, Peter Clavel, the Director of the Burlington Community and Economic Development Office. Bernie, would you say a few words, please?
So let me begin by reciprocating the very kind words from Senator Leahy and saying that we owe a debt of gratitude to the Senator for his hard work in Washington in getting us the appropriations that we needed to make sure that Northgate is going to remain affordable. So we thank you very much, Senator, for all of your hard work. There's not much that I can add to what other people have already said. We all know that there is a crisis in Burlington, in the state of Vermont, and throughout this nation in terms of affordable housing. And we know that there is something absurd about a federal government spending tremendous monies on nuclear weaponry and cutting back, as Senator Leahy indicated, by 65% for affordable housing. And we know that there's something wrong. We're all over the state of Vermont. New housing is being built, but it takes you $200,000 or $300,000 to move into that housing, and we're not building affordable housing. Now, we learned, as everybody knew, several years ago, that there was a possibility that the 300-plus units here, this is the largest affordable housing development, to the best of my knowledge, in the entire state of Vermont. And we were absolutely determined that come hell or high water, we were not going to lose this amount of affordable housing. We were not going to see it converted into expensive housing. City of Burlington moved in a number of directions. Number one, as all of you will remember, we passed a condo conversion bill. So right away, that said to the owners of this development, you're not simply going to convert this into condominium development. And I think that was an important step forward in terms of creating a kind of negotiating process that we want. Second of all, the city, working with the state, working with the federal government, Senator Leahy, created a framework by which we helped to bring together all of the cast of characters who are here today, the many people, the nonprofit, state, local, federal people. So I think we have made tremendous progress, and as Senator Leahy said, our goal here is not only to make sure that these 300-plus units of housing remain affordable, but we're going to show the entire country that we're not going to sit back and allow decent, affordable housing to be converted to expensive housing. We need affordable housing. We've made a giant step forward, and we're going to continue going, and I just want to thank everybody for all of the work that they've done. Thank you.
Secretary Moulton.
Thank you very much. I can only add my congratulations to the mayor and to Senator Leahy for this effort. The preservation of affordable housing is a high priority in our state housing plan, and I think that this is a living example of how people can work together and achieve that. It's a job well done. On behalf of the governor, I want to thank you and congratulate you and say, let's start from here and see what more we can do to achieve the same thing in other parts of Chittenden County. Thank you.
Alan Hunt.
Thank you, Mike. The role of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency is at several levels. One is that we are dealing with the owners of this project in negotiating for the sale on behalf of Northgate Nonprofit. The owners approached our agency 6 or 8 months ago, recognizing that Vermont has a need to preserve the affordable housing, and that they not only own this project but 3 others in the state. We're very interested in working with us in trying to develop a way to sell their interest in these projects in a way that would not displace or change the nature of this housing. I'm delighted that we have as strong a partner as Northgate Nonprofit to work with us in achieving that goal. I've spoken to the owners. They could not be here today. They have other commitments, but they did pledge and wanted me to say that they will have and will continue to work cooperatively with us in trying to figure out a way to make sure that these units are sold in a responsible way to nonprofit organizations, not only here but in the other parts of the state. They're very impressed with the kinds of resources that we've brought together, and I can only say that they have operated extremely cooperatively throughout this whole process. We have not set a fixed time schedule, but we hope that we'll be able to have some kind of agreement with them, ideally by the end of the year, but certainly in the next few months. So the Vermont Housing Finance Agency is willing and committed to bring its resources to the table to help save this housing. We determined early on that it didn't make sense to go out and try to create additional affordable housing if we were losing what we already had helped create out the back door. So we're putting our time, energy, resources into this effort, and we're delighted to have as many partners as we have on this project as well as other projects throughout the state. Thank you.
Seeley?
Well, I'll just try to be brief amidst all these esteemed folks that I'm up here with. The Housing and Conservation Board was established 2 years ago. We've been glad to provide a grant to the Northgate nonprofit for the good staff work you've been doing. We're particularly happy because this is a model that includes resident participation and has worked so hard to achieve resident participation in the solution of this problem. And I think you're going to be a model for the other gates around the state and other housing projects. As the mayor has said, this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the problem we have to contend with, and you're providing a very valuable model. The other thing I just briefly say is that hopefully there'll be a rapid and happy conclusion of negotiations, but the Housing and Conservation Board was established with Northgate in mind. In fact, it'd be fair to say that the initial year, our funding was increased substantially because of the efforts of Representative Carmel Babcock, knowing that Northgate was soon going to be on the market. So this is a critically important project, both because there's 336 families who live here and because it's a model for the rest of the state to begin to solve the affordable housing crisis in Vermont. Thank you.
The Community and Economic Development Office was created 5 years ago. We've been involved in the preservation of Northgate since day one. Through that involvement, we've learned 3 lessons. One is that during a time when the national federal housing programs are in total shambles and disarray, that an activist local government can make a difference. We can make a difference by identifying a problem early on, by bringing together the actors both from the private and the public sector to deal with that problem, and by dedicating some seed monies to address a solution to the problem. Lesson number 2 is that the city cannot address the affordable housing crisis by producing new housing alone. We also have to preserve what we already have. And lesson number 3, which I think is probably most important, is that the people that are most affected by this problem, the tenants that live here, must be actively involved in solving this problem. And I think that not only can and should we do that, but I think it's the only way that this issue will be resolved. And I'm very excited to see the very active involvement of the tenants through the Northgate Tenant Association. Thank you.
Next on the program, to my immediate left, is Larry Yates. He's the director of the National At-Risk Housing Project Low Income Housing Information Service, and he'll give us a little bit of detail on what's happening outside of Vermont in the national perspective. Larry?
Thank you, Mike. Senator Leahy, Mayor Sanders, Secretary Moulton, and other distinguished guests, and especially proud residents of Northgate and supporters of Northgate. It was a real honor to be invited here today by the Northgate Nonprofit Housing Corporation for my project, the National Anti-Displacement Project, the Low Income Housing Information Service. Today's a milestone in a project that is one of the nation's most promising efforts to deal with this crisis. And you've already heard what that crisis is from the senator, from the mayor. There's a threatened loss of hundreds of thousands of units of housing around the country. And low-income tenants are in danger of being thrown back into a housing market that we already know they can't compete in. About 2 months ago, 35 people from communities around the country met in Washington in response to this crisis. They came with the invitation of our project to that meeting. Some of them were tenants facing this problem who were determined to take action, and one of those was Anne Marie Dennis of Northgate. Some of them were dedicated staff people for community groups, and one of those was Brenda Torpy of Northgate Nonprofit. That meeting brought together a national network, a network of groups like your groups here today. I know you couldn't invite the entire network to be here, though I'm sure you would have been glad to do so. So I consider myself here today as a representative of that network. I'm here today to extend you congratulations and best wishes from your sisters and brothers in that network, from the Coalition for Low-Income Housing in San Francisco, the Texas Tenants Union in Dallas, Lakeview Tenants in Chicago. So you can consider them here in spirit. I'm also here to remind you the lot rides on your success. It's one of the first efforts in the nation, and this has already been mentioned, to secure threatened subsidized housing for its residents, and with the work of its residents, you can help save a lot more than 1/4 of Burlington's affordable housing. And that's important enough. You can play a role in saving those hundreds of thousands of units around the country. You can help prevent even more thousands of elderly people from being forced to choose between rent and food, even more thousands of children from being forced to grow up in shelters. You can help educate this whole country, and especially other national leaders who are not as wise and well-informed as your senator, to what organized tenants, a mobilized community, and well-directed government commitments can do. I congratulate you for today, and I look forward to working with you, and people from around the country are looking forward to working with you as you continue this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Next on the program is Carol Stewart, the director of the Burlington Ecumenical Action Ministry. BEAM, as it's known, is spearheading the fundraising drive for Northgate Nonprofit. Carol?
Thanks, Mike. A couple of years ago, BEAM's board decided that our next mission was going to be to work for affordable housing. Imagine our dismay when bringing in experts such as Peter, we found that what we were needed most for was not to help build more stock, but to help save 25% of the existing stock of housing in Burlington. So we joined with the city and several other organizations, and out of months of very hard work, which I am proud to say that BEAM has been able to contribute to through the expertise and volunteer time of its members, we're now part of the Northgate Nonprofit Corporation. We've come to a juncture where we're still in the early stages of making an effective organization, an organization that will be a combination of public and private effort. And I'm happy now that in addition to our being able to join the private effort of the tenants and the more public effort of the city and the other organizations, that the Northern Vermont home builders represent yet another participation from the private part of our community. We're at an important juncture because Senator Leahy has managed to secure a significant piece of money. It may not look large in the overall picture, but for us to continue to make this kind of organization work, it is very significant. It is tied to a local matching amount, $20,000. I'm happy to see that we're 25% of the way there as of this morning. BEAM has written to all of the churches and synagogues in the greater Burlington area, telling them the story, asking them to support this effort. But beyond that, if I have the opportunity to reach out to the community, I would like to say that this is an opportunity to use your hearts and your checkbooks for a very important and highly significant step towards saving 25% of the homes for our important group of lower, moderate income Burlingtonians, and even in the larger picture, more importantly, to create that model that's been discussed, that other communities, not only in Vermont, but throughout the country, can emulate. We need your help. We need it within the next several weeks. It's a wonderful time of the year to be thinking about it, and we very much encourage you to join with us with both your dollars, and if anyone has energy and time they want to put in, I'm sure we can put you to work. Thank you.
That concludes the speaking portion of the program. If the press has questions for the panelists.
I wonder if before we start with that, I might mention, I appreciate all the kind remarks about my involvement in this, but it would have been impossible without two very dedicated people on my staff. John Romano, who is over here, I'm just under the no smoking sign, is from the Washington staff, and John is the one who has sat in his committee of conferences sometimes to literally 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. We've been back in there again at 6 o'clock the same morning to help get the money to make sure that even after we've got a commitment for the votes that it stayed in the budget. And he has worked with Mary Miller in our Vermont office, who is just tireless in her efforts to keep after it. So I really want to acknowledge the people. I'm sort of the front person for the two of them, but they're the ones that have really been doing the work.
I think while we're acknowledging staff people, I think Brenda Torpy deserves a brow tip.
I agree.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have one. I mean, you know, $60,000 in the grand scheme of things here, as Carol sort of referred to, doesn't sound like very much money. And I guess I question what this is really going to do. I mean, there's a section in the handout here about how the funds are going to be used, talking about building a cooperative spirit with this money, resident education programs, all this kind of stuff. What I wonder, I mean, there's sort of an atmosphere here like, well, this thing's all done. It's a done deal. We're close to closing negotiations with the owners. One, how much money has yet to be leveraged in order to finish this deal with the owners? And two, is it still possible that it might fall through, that they're going to convert these units to condos or something else? I don't know who wants to answer that. Can we move mics down there?
I just say, you know, one thing that should be noted is the fact that it has gone this far, is that HUD has been willing to reserve 163 rent subsidy certificates, and that's worth about $2.5 million in the long run. I doubt very much if they hadn't seen this kind of partnership going, that they ever would have reserved that. I mean, there's one significant part, but I'll leave it to others to talk to it. But that, you know, the $20,000 and the $60,000 in organizing and putting it together is very much a leverage. $2.5 million, I think, is directly related to that. But
is that $2.5 million? If I could just ask you, Senator, quickly before we go to Congress. Is that that's absolutely guaranteed at this point? I'm not clear on that.
They reserved it if the project is going to work. It is reserved.
So in other words, if the sale goes through, that's part of the money that would go toward that.
Bob, as far as the technical aspect of the $60,000, Brenda Torpy will make herself available to explain more in detail how exactly that's going to work.
But I'm more interested in, you know, where the status of this thing is, and if it, you know, everybody's sort of talking like this is, like I said, like it's concluded, and it's not, obviously. If I can move the mics down there, if you're going to talk down.
If it was all concluded, we wouldn't even have to have this meeting.
Well, you know, I don't completely understand the purpose of this meeting, other than to talk about the $60,000, but...
Let me try to respond to that, Bob, with one caveat, and that is that we are in the process of negotiating with the owners. It's a real estate negotiation. It's been a very difficult one in some respects because what's at stake here is a very large project that has a great deal of value, not only to all of us in this room as affordable housing, but clearly its location and so on gives it value beyond that. If you had asked me 6 months ago, would we be able to pull this off, I think I would have had my doubts. While I'm not at liberty to talk about the negotiating, I can give you a range that we're negotiating in, and I'd rather not be pinned down beyond that. And that's somewhere in the vicinity of $10 to $12 million for purchase, and then there's additional money that needs to be raised to renovate and bring all of the units up to what we would consider to be a decent standard. That's a lot of money, but to recreate that would be a lot more money. I think we're at a point today where we feel that we've done an extensive amount of work. Northgate Nonprofit has done an extensive rehab survey. We know what the tenants' incomes are. The help of Senator Leahy getting the subsidies was a tremendous boost because it really protects the lowest income tenants in this project from rent increases, which we know we will have to do in order to make this thing work. So the gap that we're currently looking at, we believe, is a manageable gap when you add up all the resources that have been discussed and are potentially available. What's missing here is a loan commitment from HUD for low-interest loans to do some of the renovation work, but we think that's even possible. So clearly we're not at a point where we can say this is a done deal, but I think we're saying today that we think, given the cooperation of the owner, and he's been cooperative all along the way, that we're at a point where we can say that we think this is going to happen. It hasn't been signed, it hasn't been sealed, but we think we're now at a point where we think it's logical to say that we're within striking distance of making this work.
Terry Millie's the owner, isn't he?
That's correct.
Is he going to be getting is this a market rate for something like this, $10 to $12 million? Is he giving you any sort of break at all?
Well, again, that's a matter of opinion. I think his belief is that it's a fair price. He has investor partners that he has a responsibility to protect. I think the break will probably come in the form of some very advantageous financing that he'll extend back to the project, and he's made it clear from the beginning that he's willing to do that. He's made it clear from the beginning that he doesn't want to see any displacement of the existing tenants in this development or the other ones that he owns in the state. And he's working cooperatively with us and this organization to make sure that doesn't happen.
So how much, given what you need from HUD to that's $6.5 million for rehabilitation?
The current estimates are in that range. We haven't really gotten down to a point where we know exactly what the dollars are, but they're in that range.
So you need $16 to $18 million in total. What do you need to leverage that amount?
Well, without being too specific, I think we're within a couple $1 million of reaching that. When you identify there are existing mortgages that can be assumed, there's equity that can be raised through the sale of low-income housing tax credits, which are well underway. There are, as I said, the owner is willing to take back, in effect, some of the financing, which will bridge that gap tremendously at a rate that will hopefully keep rents down. So in the value of the subsidies, we'll be able to raise the rent, and our agency will be able to loan additional money for this project.
So in terms of private donations, which is the impression that I got when this began, what must you have? What must you raise?
Well, I think the trick here, and I don't want to dominate the conversation because I think a lot of other people have a lot to say, is that we need to sustain this effort through the whole process. And those are the dollars that are hardest to come by. The paying the salary for Brenda Torpy and the upfront expenses as you need to incur to analyze this project. And that's really what the most of this money will be used for. Hopefully not all of it. And then some of it can be used after the project is actually purchased during the renovation part.
So how much is that?
Well, what we're saying is the total package is $80,000 to sustain this organization through this process. Brenda, you might want to
Can I just clarify? I think there's a lot of confusion about this money, where it fits into the whole project. And what, the reason we went for this money, you could just buy this project, it'd still take a lot of money, and just run it the way it's been run. And this nonprofit is committed to working with the tenants to give tenant control to this project as if it was an outright co-op. Now, because of the kind of financing we need and the kind of subsidies we need to keep it affordable for folks, it can't be an outright ownership co-op, but we're going to create a leasing co-op where the tenants will have say over the management, tenants will have say over the running and control of their own housing. And in order to prepare the tenants and to work with the tenants to do that, we need the money to build that capacity. I think Larry Yates could tell you from his experience around the country, or anybody who's done housing, you don't do $22 million housing projects on a shoestring. And you don't make people overnight into owners of their housing. And so the importance of this money, and it really is one of the seeds to our whole effort, like the city money was to pull in the resources that the tenants need to help them do the job and the resources that we need. And similarly, I think if the city hadn't put in a small grant to start it up, you couldn't have brought all these folks together, which has brought, $80,000 brings $8 million once you do a year's work, a year's labor out of that money. But until that's there, you got nothing to get started with. If a private developer's developing this project, he'd have to spend money to develop this project. We've had architects come and do a physical needs assessment of the project. We now know what the rehab needs are of this project. All those things did cost money, will continue to cost money until we close. So that's really the importance of this as a stepping stone. We wouldn't have the subsidies from HUD if they hadn't become aware of our project in this budget process, where they saw what we were trying to do here and who was involved. And they said, this is a community that wants to save its housing. They really all want to do it, from the tenants right up to the city government, so let's put in our share. And I think that's how it happened.
Are there any other questions?
I just have this one. We heard a lot about the low vacancy rate here, the limited options if something like this does not work. What would happen to the tenants here if this thing falls through and rents go up significantly? Can you describe it for us in a human term?
Human term, a lot of them would have to leave the city of Burlington because there's no other housing that is affordable like Northgate. Some of them would probably become homeless, adding to that type of population. A lot of people would probably have to double up in two people living in the same apartments, or people living with their relatives and causing a lot of hardship. Living with your relatives is not usually the easiest thing to do. But I think a lot of the tenants would have to move out of the city of Burlington. There's just no place else for them to live than Northgate.
It also would be the loss of a great opportunity, because the rental certificates are worth at least $2.5 million. We're working for other subsidies. They could be worth more than a $1.5 million, as much as $1.8 million. Now, these are rental certificates and subsidies that are possible for here, but I don't know anywhere else we could get them, anywhere else we could leverage them in here in this area. It's because everybody here has worked so hard, been able to put together the kind of local as well as private group that we're able to go to bat and get those subsidies. There's no question in anybody's mind that we need the housing here. I mean, anybody who lives in this area knows how badly it's needed. But I'm afraid if it doesn't work, those subsidies will probably go somewhere else, and probably also where the housing is needed. But we need it here, and I want it here. And I think the most important thing about this is that it has worked here. And I think that if we're able to complete it all, and that's why we're probably spending so much time on it, is that we'll see this in not only other parts of Vermont, but in other states across the nation. Mayor Sanders is absolutely right. Our priorities are getting skewed in this country. And when you see every year a substantial increase in the homeless, number one, and number two, in just average Americans unable to have any place to live, I mean, what's that doing to us as a nation? We're the wealthiest, most powerful nation on earth, and yet we have millions of people hungry. We have millions of people unable to afford housing. What does all that power and all that wealth as a nation do for us if we're unable to make it work? Now, here's an example. We can make it work. And I admire the mayor for that, for his commitment. I admire the people, Ms. Dennis and everybody else who's worked so hard on this. Let's go into this, and the Northern Vermont home builders, others trying to make it work. What they're going to do is not going to be just the people here, but I can then go and argue in the HUD Appropriations Subcommittee and say, look, here's an example how it's worked. Go up there to Burlington, see how it works. Now let's do the same thing in all these other states, as well as other parts of Vermont. because otherwise we fail as a nation. I don't mean to get on a soapbox here, and you probably have heard enough speeches during the past few months from different people. But everybody wants to go off and talk as though everything is all well, everything is fine. You know, there are no problems. And we've almost gone from the politics of the lazy to the politics of the selfish in this country. But the fact is, a lot of people are hurting. A lot of people right here in Vermont, even with our low unemployment, are hurting. And here's an example where we can say, yeah, there is a responsibility in government, and let's do it. I'm sorry, I won't talk too long on that. Go ahead, yeah.
So when will you be calling us again to tell us that it's working?
When we can get a stronger commitment from HUD and from the owners. Yeah, we are working hard, and they have made promises, and they have been working with us. But at this point, they're still asking more than what it'll take to keep it affordable. The project is expensive, but it's expensive because it's the largest in the state of Vermont. There's nothing that compares with this. After we've saved this many housing in one group, you know, there's no other complexes that compare. So it's a one-time shot to save this many homes.
But I mean, like, Alan, are we talking weeks? We won't hold you to it. Weeks, months?
I'm hopeful that we will have some sort of agreement in the next few months.
Any other questions? Thank you again for all coming.